first game I completed just about crept into July as I crawled over the finish line on the 1st of the month after playing a bunch of it in June. I'd started this during my month of new games and had come back to it here and there to try out in VR, which is as amazing and motion sickness inducing as it sounds. I've been a huge Star Wars fan for pretty much my entire life, and though some of the more recent movies have been a little bit questionable, whenever I hear a TIE fighter doing that scream, I can't really help but get a little bit excited. This game features a post-Emperor explosion, the first time story, and you play as pilots from both the Rebellion and the Empire as they trade blows back and forth in search of some new super weapon. The story here is honestly totally fine as Star Wars stories go, and everyone is really well performed, but it wasn't exactly my driving force to keep playing. Or flying force, you could say. That was absolutely the gameplay. This game is just so much fun to play. It might be down to the fact that I'm flying around in ships I've grown up dreaming of climbing into, but getting in dogfights with an X-Wing or taking out capital ships with a TIE bomber never really got old. I primarily played in a controller or the Steam Deck, both of which worked excellently, and I never really felt like the controls were the thing holding me back. I did have a few sessions with a full throttle and stick, and whilst it was a lot of fun, that is quite a bit fast to get set up, so most of the time I gave it a miss. A quick note on the Steam Deck, by the way, the game ran buttery smooth and looked amazing on my 2-year-old LCD deck, so if you're wanting to play on the go, I can't really recommend it enough. My only complaint with the game is also one of the biggest strengths. Before you launch for each mission, you can customize each ship you're taking as well as your loadout. This adds another layer of complexity and does help keep things fresh. However, it also meant that every now and then, I'd make myself a loadout, launch into a mission, only to realize that I brought the complete wrong setup for what I'm going to be doing, and can either restart or have a miserable experience with the wrong tools for the job. It's not that big a deal since most missions last under 15 or 20 minutes, so you're never losing that much time. It would have just been nice to have some intel about what you're going up against before each mission, so you know what to build around. Still, I had a massive amount of fun playing through the campaign, and while there's a bunch to do in the multiplayer, I think the less I know about how bad I am compared to other players in this case, the better. If you really love Star Wars, this will be a total win. With a passable story and fun gameplay, I'm happy to give this a solid, probably biased, 8 out of 10. After Star Wars Squadrons, I go into my existential arc, which will culminate in a video hopefully coming very soon, but it all kicked off with SOMA. This is one of those games that every single YouTube video game essayist has talked about at some point or another, and after playing it, I can see exactly why. It's one of those very rare games that showcases a thought-provoking idea without doing it in a way that's so heavy-handed it's basically beating you over the head. Now sadly, I did go into this game knowing about 75% of all the twists and turns of the plot, but even so, playing it myself and seeing them happen, it still maintained a massive amount of impact. Without getting into too much spoilers and plot, you're playing as a guy that wakes up in an underwater research facility and you're trying to figure out how you got there and what the heck is going on with all these monsters. It's a pretty harrowing story, and the entire time I was playing it, I felt almost sick from how twisted it would be to live out, but it's well worth experiencing for yourself because it's just so well done. The gameplay is essentially a walking simulator. I'm not saying this to imply the game is boring, because it absolutely is not. If all I did was wander around reading different logs and talking to different people, I think the game would have still hit just as hard and only lose like half a point of spookiness. There's various monsters you also have to avoid in certain sections, and while they were pretty spooky in how they looked, sounded, behaved, they were never much of a threat once you worked out how they functioned. You either run away or sneak around, and the margin for error with both is pretty generous. I never felt like I was in much danger that I couldn't easily get myself out of. It was still pretty tense hiding around corners and waiting for the monster to move past, but it was more so the horrifying visuals and audio making me tense than the fear of being spotted. And then even if you are spotted, I never once died to monsters for the entire game, since most of the time they just yell in your face and then scuttle away, leaving you to keep moving forward. While I'm glad the monsters are there because of how disturbing they are to see and hear, it did occasionally feel like they were just placed there to slow the game down. And that really is my only complaint with the game. The story is fantastic and something I will be thinking about forever. The atmosphere and design is brilliant and horrifying in a very original style. If you're a horror game fan, I really can't recommend this one enough. It is a near perfect 9.5 out of 10. To keep up with the existentialism, I then played The Swapper. This is a short puzzle game from 2013 where you create clones and swap between them to progress through the map and solve various puzzle rooms. As you might have guessed, the story here also has a lot of existentialism and spook, which I very much enjoyed. While I wouldn't say it's beaten SOMA in the story department, in the short time it has, it tells a very compelling horror story. Again, I want to avoid spoilers as much as I can, but you're ejected from a space station and have to make your way back on board to figure out what's going on by chasing down the only other person left. As you find out more about this person and what's really going on, it only gets more disturbing. The gameplay here is decent enough. I'm not a massive puzzle fan and was more playing this for the plot, but the clone swapping gimmick was a lot of fun and made for some creative solutions that took quite a while to work out. Full transparency, I used the guide for some of the harder puzzles, so if you want to take away some of my gamer points, go right ahead. But like I said, I was playing this for the story, so I wanted to get to that fast instead of bashing my dumb head against the wall trying to work out what to do. Not a lot more to say, it's a nice short game you can complete in under 3 hours if you're a big brain. My one major complaint is it has 2 endings, and the only way to see both is to play the entire game twice. If this had some branching dialogues or choices, then I'd get this decision, but it doesn't, so you'll be playing the exact same game all over again to see about a minute of different cutscene. I mean, I know it's only another 3 hours, but come on guys. Anyway, if you like puzzles and existential stories, then this is the game for you. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I picked this up as another existential type game, and whilst it does have a few elements that fed into that, the main plot was more anti-corporation and capitalism and the power of unions, which I very much enjoyed, but I felt it'd be better talked about in a different kind of video. Anyway, the plot follows you as you leave Earth to become a shipbreaker. Every day you get up to dismantle increasingly large and complex space ships, sorting their parts into different areas to meet your quotas and attempt to clear the several $1 billion of debt the company saddles you with when you sign up. You meet a few others in your crew and they all complain about the company and how they'd like to unionize but doubt anything will ever happen. Middle management turns up, and as they always do, they screw everything up. It takes some twists and turns, and the vocal performances really sell what's happening and make management really easy to hate.
You gone way out of line here, Hal. This is my crew, and I say who stays and who goes. Save it, Joseph. I've shared all this with headquarters. And now, I've got one last thing. A message from Rye Paulson herself.
I'm obviously all for this type of story and very much enjoyed it at every opportunity. The gameplay was also a ton of fun. Breaking apart giant ships and sorting their different parts into the right deposits was a lot of fun and extremely satisfying. The ships get larger and more complex as you go, requiring you to use more advanced tools to effectively do your job. The progression is fun up to a point, and then it kinda hits a roadblock. You end up clearing the same ship over and over and over again because you've reached the max rank for size and all of your tools are powerful enough to get the job done, so the remaining upgrades also don't really change anything. It was only towards the end, but it really started to get a bit repetitive. This might have been the point to showcase how corporations suck the joy from everything they touch, but when it's a game that I'm playing, that's probably going a little bit too far. Another area that held back the gameplay was the artificial limits. Every shift runs for 15 minutes, forcing you to rush or take several shifts to clear out a single ship. Your tools break down over time and have some limited uses that need to be restocked alongside your oxygen and fuel. There is a mode that turns most of this off, but I tried to go into games on normal difficulty as the creator intended, and while I get this is how a corporation would do it, to try and rush as much money as fast as possible, it just forced me to endure several minutes of loading screens to complete a single ship and progress the game when I could just remove the time limit and do it in one. Anyway, don't let all these little complaints take away from the game. It's still a lot of fun and has a very strong plot that makes it worth pushing through those slow sections. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. This, I'm obviously playing for one reason only, the essayist clout. I mean, technically I'm playing it so I have clips for an essay, but it's mainly the clout. The game is of course based on the short story by Harlan Ellison and was actually co-designed by the animal corpse mailer himself.
What the fuck?
It offers a slightly different take on the story than the book, and goes into each character a lot more, giving them a more detailed backstory and personal hells they're put through. It also strangely changes it so you can have multiple different endings, including one that's sort of happy, which I feel kind of defeats the purpose of the book. Spoilers for this short story that you can finish in an hour that came out like 50 odd years ago. So at the end of the book, one of the characters gets transformed into an immortal blob creature by Am, the evil AI overlord. That transformation is where the "I have no mouth and I must scream" phrase comes from, so taking it away in exchange for a happy ending, it just feels a little wrong to me. It's a little like if you made a Rocky game but left the option to quit boxing and become a florist. Anywho, this is one of those classic point-and-click adventure games, and that means a bunch of clicking around on everything on screen to work out what to do. Full disclosure, I tried to play this without a guide for about 10 minutes and then used one for the rest of my time. Like I said, I was playing this for the extra story, clips, and of course, the clout, so I really didn't care about spending 45 minutes clicking on the floor to find one area I'm meant to use. If you want to remove this from my games completed scorecard in your own mind, then feel free. If you've ever read the short story and want more, then this will be a great pickup for you. You get a lot more information about the 5 characters and follow them on their own little side quests of torment. If you're just looking for a fun game to play, this probably isn't for you, especially if you don't want to use a guide. The story is cool, but the book is probably better overall. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. This I've been playing on and off for the best part of a year. I like to have a couple of roguelites on the go at a time to keep things fresh, but this month I decided to knuckle down and beat this one at least once. While technically you can play these sorts of games essentially forever and there's tons more content for me to unlock and discover, I beat the final boss and rolled credits, so I'm counting it as a win. It's an incredibly fast-paced first-person shooter where you play as various robots taking out other robots with all kinds of weapons and gadgets. The weapon variety here is crazy. Not only are there a boatload of different weapon forms from long-range snipers to melee swords, there's a near infinite combination of traits and quirks that makes each one you pick up feel distinctly different from the rest. While I would say there are for sure some that are way better than others, it all really depends on your preference and playstyle. I enjoyed keeping well back from enemies and taking them down from a distance, but you might enjoy going in deep and taking them out up close and personal. Both can be done to great effect, with the only exception being certain boss battles. Those close out most levels and offer some great challenge alongside variety. Eventually, you'll keep running into the same bosses over and over again, but there's enough of them that you're not going to face the same lineup every single time. Non-boss enemy variety is also pretty decent. There's a load of melee and ranged bots of various kinds, and effectively taking each one out turns into its own puzzle to be worked out in the heat of combat. All this adds up to a game that is just a ton of fun to play. It also looks amazing. It's not hyper-realistic ray traced graphics or anything, but the art style chosen looks really great and runs very smoothly. It's the little touches like text popping up during reloads that just shows the level of detail and care that went into this game. Everything also sounds as good as it looks, and the soundtrack here is just as relentless as the gameplay. It easily sinks you into this flow state where all you can think about is the game, and that's something that very rarely happens to me. Technically, this game does have a story, but it's pretty much just save the world from evil robots and refuse to elaborate. It's not really a problem as the game is brilliant without any plot, but if you're looking for something to analyze, then you're probably going to struggle outside of data logs. Now, I do have just one complaint. Once you begin a run, there's no option to save and come back to it later. Now granted, runs last under an hour, even if you're exploring every nook and cranny, but still, it'd be really great to have that option so I don't need to lock in for 40 minutes every single time I want to play. If it had the option, I would be pretty happy to give this a 10 out of 10, but as it stands, I can't give it more than a 9.5. Another roguelite, but the tone here would not be more different. I'd been going back and forth on whether I want to play this game for the longest time since all the reviews said it was super hard, and I don't really like throwing my controller through my monitor. I finally bit the bullet when I learned how cool the plot can be, and I'm extremely glad that I did. It has that rare quality that very few games are able to pull off. Whenever I'm playing it, I get the feeling that I'm traveling to a place that I really don't want to be, and yet I can't stop going. Very much like SOMA. Atropos is a truly terrifying place, and it looks flower amazing. I'm playing on PC with maxed out settings, and everything from the environments to the weather to the particle effects, it just looks fantastic. It's one of the best looking games I've ever played, and every new area seems to top the last one, both in how magnificent they looked and how uninviting they felt. The story that's drip fed to you over the course of the game is horrifying and brilliant, and something that I can't stop myself from thinking about. Similar to SOMA, I get the feeling that I'll be thinking about this game for a long time after I've stopped playing it. There's no way to talk about without spoiling, so I'll say that your objective quickly goes from finding a way to escape to looking for the reason you're trapped here, and the answers to both don't bring you any more peace than the not knowing. Gameplay is of course the area I was most worried about, and honestly, I don't really know why. Whilst this game is challenging, it's not the impossible tasks that most reviews have claimed. The first boss is probably the hardest in the game purely because you're inexperienced and lack a few permanent upgrades you unlock in later levels. I completed the entire first act in my first attempt. I did then have to wipe my save as Shadowplay hadn't recorded anything, so all the cool story clips I'd saved were lost to the Shadow Realm, and then it took me 3 attempts to get back to where I was, but that's just life. The game is challenging and fast-paced, but it's not impossible. It massively rewards exploration in clearing out the map, and the more you explore, the more resources you find and more upgrades you can purchase, which makes following combat far easier. If you head straight to the boss as soon as you're able, you'll absolutely struggle, so methodically clearing each part of the map is the way to go. And while it may be more time consuming, it will save you from repeated failures later. Anywho, difficulty aside, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, combat is very fast paced with potentially hundreds of particles and missiles on screen at once, making it equal parts third-person shooter and bullet hell. The weapon variety continues to expand all the way to the end of the game, and the huge number of special abilities and traits makes each weapon feel viable in its own way depending on what you're up against. That said, There were certain weapon types that just felt far worse than others, so the balance isn't exactly perfect, but good enough in most cases. No matter what, it more comes down to skill than being lucky and getting an overpowered weapon. You can have your perfect combo of weapons and traits and still lose if you aren't playing well. Like I said, it's not an impossible game, but you do have to be fairly switched on and paying attention if you want to get through. I did run into a couple of bugs during my playtime. Once I got completely stuck and had to restart my run. I was only a few minutes in, so it wasn't that big a deal, but still, not what you want in a game where you have to start from the beginning. I also ran into a weird bug where I fell off the map and then the screen would stay black until I fell off again. This was much more annoying as health isn't exactly something you're normally swimming in during the game, so having to lose some twice in a row to be able to see again wasn't the greatest. On the whole, I love playing this game and will likely continue playing it both for fun and to find an elusive secret ending. It's given me a great idea for another essay video, so stay tuned for that in like 2045. It's got to be a 9 out of 10. And that was June. I think that's actually my record for games completed in a single month in like my entire life. And with 3 9s, it's a win for both quantity and quality, so I'm definitely not complaining. For anyone wondering, I have finished writing the next essay. It's right here on another tab directly in front of me. I just need to actually record it, but we've got family coming over to visit literally in like 2 days from when I'm recording this. So I need to like go away for a week. But it is coming, I assure you of that. I'm really excited for it and I can't wait to share it with you. Just give me a little bit more time. Thank you very much. But in the meantime, I really appreciate your patience and thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you've been playing this month. Subscribe if you want to see more. Like the video if you did. Love yourself no matter what. And I'll see you in the next one.